What if the love you thought was buried forever suddenly resurfaces, threatening to reopen wounds you've spent decades trying to heal? What would you do if your deepest regret was given a second chance, not through you, but through your child? Have you ever felt the universe conspiring to force you to confront the very past you've been running from? That's exactly what happened to Sophia Reynolds. The moment she crossed the town line back into Ashland, Oregon, she could feel it, that peculiar weight in the air, as if the town itself remembered her betrayal. 20 years ago, she'd fled. This place with a broken heart and unfulfilled promises. Now, divorced and starting over at 38, she returns with her teenage daughter to the one place she swore she'd never set foot in again. But what Sophia doesn't realize is that some love stories refuse to end. They simply wait for the right moment to continue. And sometimes, they find new life through the next generation in ways more powerful and healing than anyone could imagine. Now let's return to that autumn day when everything changed. Nestled in the shadows of rolling hills, Ashland was known for two things: its annual Shakespeare Festival that drew tourists from across the country, and its unyielding memory. A place where stories never died, merely slumbered until awakened again by whispers and sidelong glances. A place where family names carried weight heavier than the ornate costumes adorning actors on the Elizabethan stage. It was here, 20 years ago, that 18-year-old Sophia had first given her heart to Liam Carter, a boy whose gentle hands could transform raw wood into something beautiful, just as he had transformed her shy smile into unrestrained laughter. And it was here that their love had withered under the disapproving gaze of a town that believed some families simply weren't meant to intertwine. "Mom, are you sure this is the right school?" Emma's voice pulled Sophia from her reverie as they stood before Ashland High School, its brick facade unchanged since Sophia's own teenage years. It looks like something out of a period drama. At 17, Emma Reynolds was everything her mother had never been at that age. Confident, outspoken, with dreams too big for small-town constraints. Her auburn hair caught the morning light as she shifted her weight from one foot to another, impatience radiating from her slender frame. "This is it," Sophia nodded, tucking a strand of her own darker hair behind her ear. "I promise it's better on the inside. They have an incredible theater program." Emma's eyes lit up at that, the one consolation prize Sophia could offer, for uprooting her from Portland after the divorce. Theater was Emma's oxygen, performing her heartbeat. Perhaps here, in this town of Shakespeare devotees, her daughter might find her place. What Sophia didn't say was how every step on Ashland's cobblestone streets felt like walking backward through her own history. How each familiar storefront and cafe awoke memories she'd spent years carefully folding away and storing in the darkest corners of her mind. The school office smelled of paper and coffee, just as it had when Sophia was a student. The secretary's welcoming smile faltered only slightly when Sophia gave her name. "Reynolds, weren't you a Mitchell before?" the woman asked, recognition dawning in her eyes. "That was a lifetime ago," Sophia replied quietly, the weight of her maiden name settling uncomfortably on her shoulders. As they finalized Emma's registration, the door swung open, and time seemed to fold in on itself. Liam Carter stood in the doorway, taller than she remembered, his dark hair now threaded with silver at the temples, but his eyes, those deep blue eyes, unchanged. Beside him stood a boy who could only be his son, with the same strong jawline but a hesitancy in his posture that Liam had never possessed. Their eyes met over the counter, and 20 years evaporated like morning mist. "Sophia." His voice was lower, richer than in her memories. "Liam." Not a question but an acknowledgement, as if his name had been waiting on her lips all these years. Emma glanced between them, her intuition sharp as always. "Old friend of yours, Mum. Old friend, old flame, old wound," which was true, perhaps all of them. "We grew up together," Sophia managed, the understatement of 2 decades. The secretary cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter is here about the theater program too. His son Ethan is quite the writer. Wrote last year's fall production." Emma's interest visibly piqued as she studied the quiet boy who stood slightly behind his father. "You write plays?" "Ethan," nodded, his eyes meeting Emma's briefly before finding refuge in the pattern of the linoleum floor. Just small stuff. Emma's an actress, Sophia offered, finding her voice again. She was in several productions in Portland. The theater department is holding auditions for Romeo and Juliet this afternoon, Liam said. That's why we're here. Ethan's helping with the adaptation. The universe, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of humor. Of all the plays in all the world, it would be Romeo and Juliet, the ultimate tale of star-crossed lovers and family feuds that would bring their children together. As they left the office, an awkward silence stretched between the adults, while Emma immediately began questioning Ethan about his writing, her natural exuberance drawing reluctant responses from the reserved boy. "So you're back," Liam finally said as they walked toward the parking lot. "Just moved in last week," Sophia replied. "I'm teaching art at the elementary school." "You always were talented." His voice held a note of something Sophia couldn't quite identify. Regret, perhaps, or simple politeness. Before she could respond, a sleek black SUV pulled up, and a striking woman with perfectly styled blonde hair stepped out. Her designer sunglasses did little to hide the flash of recognition and displeasure that crossed her face when she spotted Sophia. "Liam, darling, I was just coming to bring Ethan his script revisions." Lana Brooks, though Sophia recalled her maiden name had been Thompson, air-kissed Liam's cheek while her eyes remained fixed on Sophia. At 39, Lana carried herself with the polished confidence of someone accustomed to being the most influential person in any room. "Sophia, you remember Lana? She's our community council president now and my stepmother," Liam added, the last part carrying a weight that suggested a complicated history. Stepmother. Sophia struggled to mask her surprise. Lana was only a few years older than them, which meant, "Welcome back to Ashland, Sophia." Lana's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I heard about your divorce. Such a shame. I do hope you find our little town nigh healing." The way she emphasized the last word made it sound like a challenge rather than a welcome. As Emma and Ethan arranged to meet later for the auditions, Sophia couldn't help but notice how Lana's hand tightened on Liam's arm, possessive warning. Some things in Ashland, it seemed, hadn't changed at all. The town still thrived on its unspoken hierarchies and carefully guarded boundaries. What had changed, however, was Sophia herself. She was no longer the love-struck girl willing to let others dictate her happiness. She had survived heartbreak, built a career, raised a remarkable daughter, and endured the slow, painful dissolution of her marriage. She had returned to Ashland, not in defeat, but in resilience. And perhaps that would make all the difference this time around. "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" Emma's voice rang clear through the auditorium, her eyes fixed not on Ethan but somewhere beyond him, capturing Juliet's longing with a maturity that belied her 17 years. From the shadows of the back row, Sophia watched her daughter transform on stage, shedding her modern sensibilities to become Shakespeare's love-struck teenager. Beside Ethan stood Mr. Douglas Green, the aging theatre director, whose silver hair and kind eyes had changed little since Sophia's own high school days. He nodded approvingly as Emma delivered her lines, occasionally glancing down at Ethan's. "Modified script. She's quite remarkable," a voice murmured, and Sophia turned to find Liam sliding into the seat beside her. "Has the natural talent that can't be taught." "Thank you," Sophia whispered back, pride warming her voice. Ethan's adaptation is impressive. He's captured the essence while making it accessible. On stage, Emma leaned tentatively toward Ethan, their faces illuminated by the harsh stage lights as they rehearsed the famous balcony scene. There was an awkwardness between them that somehow added authenticity to the forbidden romance they portrayed. "You're Juliet and my Romeo," Liam observed quietly. "There's irony there, don't you think?" Sophia felt her chest tighten. "Let's hope their story ends differently than ours did." "Or than the original," Liam added with a sad smile. Mr. Green clapped his hands, his resonant voice carrying through the auditorium. "Excellent chemistry, you two. I think we've found our perfect leads. Everyone, take 15 minutes. Then we'll block the masquerade scene." As the students dispersed, Emma bounded down from the stage, her eyes shining. "Mum, did you see Mr. Green says I'm a natural Juliet. I did see, sweetheart. You were wonderful. Ethan approached more cautiously, his script clutched tightly in one hand. Your daughter is very talented, Mrs. Reynolds, he said formally, as if reciting practiced lines. Please call me Sophia, she replied warmly. And thank you. I was just telling your father how impressed I am with your adaptation. A genuine smile briefly illuminated Ethan's face before the auditorium doors swung open with a bang, revealing Lana Brooks in an impeccable pantsuit, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she approached. Ethan, darling, she called, her voice echoing. I've brought the community council members to preview the production. They're very interested in your work. The boy's shoulders immediately tensed, his momentary ease evaporating under Lana's scrutiny. Sophia noticed how he unconsciously moved closer to his father, seeking protection. Lana, we've discussed this, Liam said quietly but firmly. The preview isn't for 3 weeks. Plans change, dear, Lana replied with a dismissive wave. The council has a funding meeting tomorrow and I want them to see what talent we're nurturing. Her gaze swept over Emma, assessing, I see you've cast our newcomer as Juliet. Bold choice. Mr. Green stepped forward, his tall frame radiating authority despite his age. Mrs. Brooks, while we appreciate the council's interest, we're not prepared for a preview today. The students need time to develop their characters. Of course, Douglas. Lana's smile was tight. I simply thought, perhaps you could join us for the scheduled preview, Sophia suggested, surprised by her own intervention. I'm sure by then Emma and Ethan will have had time to truly bring your stepson's vision to life. Lana's eyes narrowed slightly at the emphasis Sophia placed on the word stepson. How thoughtful of you to be concerned with my family's affairs, Sophia, especially given your history with the Carters. The barb found its mark, and Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. 20 years had done nothing to dull Lana's talent for finding vulnerabilities. I should check on Emma, Sophia murmured, retreating toward the stage where her daughter was deep in conversation with other cast members. As she walked away, she heard Lana's voice, pitched just loud enough to carry, Ethan, dear, remember what we discussed about the Carter family reputation. Your mother would have wanted you to uphold it. Sophia didn't need to turn around to know that those words had struck their intended target. She had seen how Ethan's expression changed at the mention of his mother. A flash of raw grief quickly masked. She recognized that look. She had seen it in her own mirror in the months after her divorce, when Emma would ask innocent questions about why her father had left. Later, as rehearsal continued, Sophia noticed a change in Ethan's demeanor toward Emma. The easy rapport they had begun to develop had vanished, replaced by a cautious distance that affected their performance. Emma, ever sensitive to emotional undercurrents, responded with increased effort, her Juliet becoming more desperate in her affection, which only seemed to push Ethan's Romeo further away. After rehearsal, Emma was uncharacteristically quiet on the drive home to their small rented bungalow near the park. Something on your mind, honey? Sophia asked, glancing at her daughter's reflection in the rearview mirror. Emma sighed, staring out the window at the passing houses. Ethan was different after his stepmom showed up, like he suddenly remembered he wasn't supposed to like me. I'm sure it's not personal, Sophia reassured her, though uncertainty gnawed at her. First rehearsals are always awkward. Mom, Emma turned to face her, eyes serious. What happened between you and Mr. Carter? And don't say, we grew up together again. There's obviously more to it. Sophia gripped the steering wheel tighter. She'd always been honest with Emma, believing that truth, even difficult truth, was the foundation of their close relationship. But how to explain a love that had been simultaneously the most authentic and most painful experience of her young life? Liam was my first love, she admitted finally. We were inseparable during our junior and senior years, but his family, they had expectations. The Carters are one of Ashland's oldest families and mine. She smiled ruefully. Well, my father worked at their lumber mill and my mother cleaned houses, including theirs. That's ridiculous, Emma scoffed. That's like what? Romeo and Juliet without the dying. Something like that, Sophia nodded. When I got accepted to art school in Portland, Liam was going to come with me. We had it all planned. But then his father had a heart attack, and suddenly he was expected to stay and join the family business, and you still left. I wanted him to come with me, Sophia said softly, but he chose to stay, and maybe he was right to do so. We were young, and family obligations are powerful things. What she didn't tell Emma was about the night before she left for Portland, when Liam had come to her window like some modern-day Romeo, begging her to wait for him, promising that he'd find a way to join her once his father recovered. How? She had kissed him one last time, tasting the salt of their mingled tears, before gently reminding him that some love stories weren't meant to have happy endings. She had written to him every week for months. His replies grew shorter, less frequent until they stopped altogether. 6 months later, she learned through a mutual friend that he was engaged to Madeline Williams, daughter of the bank president, and considered a perfect match for the Carter heir. So that's why it's weird between you two, Emma mused. But what does that have to do with me and Ethan? We're just acting together in a play. Nothing, Sophia said firmly as they pulled into their driveway. Absolutely nothing. You and Ethan aren't us, and this isn't 20 years ago. Those old town dynamics don't matter anymore. But as she said it, she wondered if she was trying to convince Emma or herself, because the look in Lana's eyes today had made it abundantly clear. In Ashland, the past was never truly past. It was merely waiting in the wings for its cue to return to center stage. As October painted Ashland in shades of amber and crimson, rehearsals intensified. The premiere of Romeo and Juliet was scheduled to coincide with the town's annual harvest festival, a strategic decision by Mr. Green to ensure a full house and maximum exposure for his students. Emma threw herself into the role of Juliet with characteristic determination, practicing lines until they flowed as naturally as her own thoughts. Ethan, however, grew increasingly withdrawn. His performance remained technically proficient, but lacked the emotional connection that had made their early readings so promising. One evening, after a particularly difficult rehearsal where Ethan had barely met Emma's eyes during their romantic scenes, Mr. Green asked them both to stay late. Theater isn't just about memorizing lines, he said, pacing before them on the empty stage. It's about vulnerability, about allowing yourself to be seen. He stopped, looking pointedly at Ethan. Something is blocking you, young man. Find a way around it, or through it, before opening night. In the hallway afterward, Emma caught up to Ethan as he headed for the exit. Want to get coffee and run lines? She asked, hoisting her backpack higher on her shoulder. We could work on that balcony scene that keeps tripping us up. Ethan hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. I don't think that's a good idea. Because of your stepmom, Emma challenged, her patience wearing thin after weeks of his hot and cold behavior. You don't understand, he said, voice low. It's complicated. Then explain it to me, Emma persisted, because I'm tired of feeling like I've done something wrong when I haven't. Ethan looked around the empty hallway as if checking for eavesdroppers before speaking. Lana told me about your mom and my dad, how your mom left him broken-hearted, and how my real mom had to pick up the pieces. Emma stared at him in disbelief. That's not how my mom tells it. Of course not, Ethan replied bitterly. No one ever admits when they're the villain in someone else's story. My mom is not a villain, Emma's voice rose with indignation. She's the most honest person I know. If that's what your stepmom told you, she's either misinformed or straight up lying. Don't talk about Lana that way. Ethan's defense was automatic, though something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, perhaps. She's been there for me since my mom died. Your mom left this town without looking back. Mine loved it until her last breath. With that, he pushed past her and out into the crisp autumn air, leaving Emma standing alone, fury and confusion warring within her. Meanwhile, across town, Sophia sat in a small cafe, grading student artwork when a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she found Liam standing there, 2 steaming cups in hand. Peace offering, he said, placing one before her. Earl Grey with honey if your taste hasn't changed? Sophia's eyebrows rose in surprise. You remember how I take my tea? I remember everything, Soph, he replied softly, using the nickname that only he had ever called her. He gestured to the empty chair across from her. May I? She nodded, pushing aside her work. For a moment they sat in silence, the years between them both a bridge and a barrier. Emma mentioned that rehearsals have been challenging, Sophia finally said. Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made Sophia's heart ache. Ethan's struggling, not just with the play, with everything really, since Madeline passed. I was so sorry to hear about that, Sophia said gently. Emma mentioned it was sudden. Cancer, Liam replied, his voice hollow. From diagnosis to the end it was less than 6 months. Ethan was 15, old enough to understand what was happening, but too young to know how to process it. And then you married Lana. Sophia couldn't keep the question from slipping out, immediately regretting how it sounded. Liam's laugh held no humor. No, that was Madeline's father. He married Lana about a year after Madeline died. Apparently they'd been having an affair for quite some time. When he passed last winter, she became Ethan's legal guardian alongside me, due to some complicated trust arrangements George had set up. Sophia struggled to hide her shock. The pieces were falling into place now. Lana's hostility, her possessiveness toward Ethan, her determination to keep the past buried. I had no idea, she murmured. How could you? Liam shrugged. You made a clean break, built a new life. There was no accusation in his tone, only a sort of weary acceptance. Not as clean as you might think, Sophia admitted. Ashland has a way of lingering. Their eyes met over their cooling tea, and for a moment Sophia glimpsed the boy she had loved in the man sitting across from her, the same kindness in his gaze, the same quiet strength in his bearing. Why did you really come back, Soph? He asked softly. Before she could answer, the cafe door chimed, and Lana walked in, her radar for Liam apparently unerring. Her smile froze when she spotted them together. Well, isn't this cozy? She remarked, approaching their table. Liam, the contractor, called about the stage renovations. He needs your approval on the lumber order. It was a transparent excuse, but Liam nodded, gathering his things. Think about what I said, he told Sophia as he stood. Maybe we could all have dinner sometime. You, me, and the kids. Clear the air. After he left, Lana lingered, her manicured nails tapping against the wooden table. A word of advice, Sophia, she said, her voice honeyed poison. History doesn't always deserve a revival. Sometimes it's best left in the past where it belongs. That's the funny thing about the past, Lana, Sophia replied evenly. It has a way of revealing truth, no matter how hard some people try to rewrite it. Lana's eyes narrowed. You think you know something? Let me be clear, I've spent years building my life in this town. I won't let you waltz back in and disrupt everything because you're having some midlife crisis. My being here has nothing to do with you, Sophia stated firmly. Doesn't it? Lana leaned closer. We both know why you've really returned. But let me save you the trouble. Liam has moved on. Ethan doesn't need his life complicated by your daughter or your influence. If you care about Emma at all, you'll encourage her to withdraw from the play before opening night. With that parting shot, Lana swept out of the cafe, leaving behind the lingering scent of expensive perfume and unmistakable threat. That evening, Emma burst into their home, tears streaming down her face. Ethan quit the play, she exclaimed, throwing her backpack onto the couch. Just went to Mr. Green and said he couldn't do it. 2 weeks before opening night. Sophia felt her stomach drop. Did he say why? He said he couldn't pretend to be in love with someone whose family destroyed his. Emma's voice cracked on the last words. Mom, what is he talking about? What really happened between you and his dad? Sophia sank onto the couch, patting the space beside her. As Emma sat, Sophia took her daughter's hands in hers. What I told you before was true but not complete, she began. When Liam stayed in Ashland, he didn't just stay for his family. He became engaged to Ethan's mother, Madeline, very quickly after I left. He dumped you. Emma's protective indignation flared. It wasn't that simple, Sophia sighed. His letters stopped coming, and then I heard about the engagement through friends. I was heartbroken, but I understood the pressure he was under. What I didn't know until today was that Madeline apparently struggled with depression, especially after Ethan was born. And Lana's telling Ethan that's your fault somehow. That's insane. It's easier to blame an outsider than to face complex truths, Sophia said softly. Lana has her own reasons for wanting to keep Liam and me apart. This is so messed up, Emma groaned, falling back against the cushions. And now I don't have a Romeo, and the play is probably cancelled, and the entire theatre department will hate me because they'll think it's my fault. Sophia squeezed her daughter's hand. I think it's time I had a talk with Mr. Green. The next day, Sophia found the theatre director in the auditorium, making notes on a clipboard as stagehands constructed elaborate sets around him. No, play is worth this, she said without preamble. The drama is supposed to stay on stage, not spill into these kids' lives. Mr. Green looked up, his wise eyes assessing her. Sit down, Sophia, he said, gesturing to the seats beside him. I've been expecting you. As she sat, he continued. Did you know that when you left Ashland all those years ago, Liam came to me? He was torn apart by what he saw as his failure to choose love over obligation. Sophia was stunned. I didn't know. Of course not. You were gone, building your new life. But I've watched this town's patterns repeat themselves for 40 years from this very stage. He tapped his clipboard against the armrest. The Montagues and Capulets of Ashland change their names with each generation, but the prejudices remain the same. So what do we do? Sophia asked. Emma's heartbroken, and Ethan's been fed a version of history that demonizes me. The truth has a weight that fiction cannot sustain, Mr. Green replied cryptically. Sometimes the only way forward is to step back and examine the past with clear eyes. That sounds profound, but I'm not sure how it helps our current situation. Mr. Green's eyes twinkled. I haven't cancelled the play. I've merely restructured it. I'd like you to read this. He handed her a sheaf of papers. It's Ethan's original adaptation, before Lana suggested her improvements. As Sophia scanned the pages, her breath caught. Ethan had reimagined Romeo and Juliet not as a tragedy of star-crossed lovers, but as a multi-generational story of redemption. In his version, the feuding families eventually reconciled, not through the deaths of their children, but through honest confrontation with the past and forgiveness. This is... She struggled to find words. The truth as seen through a young man's eyes, Mr. Green finished for her, before others clouded his vision with their own fears and regrets. Does Liam know about this? Not yet, but I think it's time he did. Time everyone did. The director stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the empty seats. The greatest gift of theatre, Sophia, is that it allows us to see ourselves from the outside, to witness our own follies, and perhaps learn from them. As she left the auditorium clutching Ethan's original script, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced since returning to Ashland. Hope. Perhaps the past didn't have to dictate the future. Perhaps there was still time to write a new ending for all of them. The night of the play arrived with the crisp clarity unique to autumn evenings. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation, not just for the production, but for the gossip surrounding it. Word had spread about Ethan's abrupt departure and subsequent return to the cast under mysterious circumstances. The program, hastily reprinted, now credited the play as Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, special adaptation by Ethan Carter and Douglas Green. Backstage, Emma paced in her elaborate Juliet costume, her nervous energy palpable. What if he doesn't show up? She whispered to her mother, who was helping with last-minute costume adjustments. What if he changes his mind again? He'll be here, Sophia reassured her, though her own stomach churned with uncertainty. She hadn't spoken directly to Liam since their interrupted cafe conversation a week ago, communicating only through brief texts about the production. A knock at the dressing room door revealed Mr. Green, his expression unusually solemn. It's time, lady. And Emma, remember what we discussed. Tonight isn't just about performing a role, it's about living a truth. As Emma nodded and headed toward the stage, Sophia made her way to her reserved seat in the front row. To her surprise, the seat beside hers was occupied by Liam, looking uncharacteristically formal in a dark suit. "I didn't know we'd be sitting together," she murmured, as she took her place. "I requested it," he replied, his voice low. "Green seems to think we both need to see this from the same perspective." Before Sophia could respond, the lights dimmed and a hush fell over the audience. Instead of the traditional Shakespearean opening, a single spotlight illuminated Mr. Green. As he stepped onto the stage, "Tonight we present a unique interpretation of Romeo and Juliet," he announced, his resonant voice filling the space without need for amplification. "Shakespeare wrote that the sins of the father are visited upon the children, but perhaps it is equally true that through children, parents may find redemption for their sins. Please note that portions of tonight's performance represent original writing by our own talented students, inspired by, but departing from Shakespeare's text." With that cryptic introduction, he stepped back, and the curtain rose to reveal not the streets of Verona, but a stylized representation of Ashland itself. The backdrop depicted the town's iconic Shakespeare Festival theatre, while the foreground showed two houses, one modest, one grand, separated by an invisible but palpable boundary. As the play unfolded, Sophia realized with growing amazement what Mr. Green and Ethan had done. Interwoven with the traditional Romeo and Juliet story were original scenes depicting a separate narrative, one featuring characters whose circumstances eerily mirrored her own history with Liam. A young woman from a working-class family, a young man bound by family expectations, their love thwarted not by outright hostility, but by the subtle, insidious pressure of social convention. Beside her, she felt Liam stiffen as he too recognized their story playing out on stage. His hand resting on the armrest between them, clenched into a fist. The familiar balcony scene arrived, but with a twist. As Emma's Juliet spoke her famous lines questioning why Romeo had to be a Montague, Ethan's Romeo responded not with Shakespeare's words, but with an anguished monologue about identity, obligation, and the weight of family legacy. "What is a claim?" he cried, his voice breaking perfectly on the question. "A prison built of others' expectations, a legacy I never chose but am condemned to uphold. Would that I could shed it like a snake sheds its skin, emerging new and unnamed, free to love without the burden of the past." Emma's response also, clearly original writing, was delivered with such raw emotion that Sophia felt tears spring to her eyes. "Then shed it," her Juliet urged, reaching down from her perch, "not the name itself, but the fear that binds you to it. For what is legacy if not the courage to forge a new path where the old one leads only to sorrow?" Throughout the audience, tissues emerged from purses and pockets. On stage, the young actors continued their dance of approaching and retreating, their love constantly threatened by external forces, particularly a character not found in Shakespeare's original, a manipulative Lady Capulet figure who had secretly loved Romeo's father and now sought to destroy any union that echoed the love she had been denied. When the actress playing this character stepped into the light, her resemblance to Lana was subtle but unmistakable, from the elegant updo to the distinctive way she tilted her head when delivering threats disguised as concern. In the third row, the real Lana shifted uncomfortably, her mouth drawn into a tight line as the implications of the characterization became impossible to ignore. The climax, when it came, departed radically from Shakespeare's tragic ending. Instead of the familiar death scene, Romeo stood center stage and delivered a passionate speech about truth and courage to the assembled characters representing both feuding households. "We have been living lies told by those who came before us," Ethan proclaimed, his voice stronger than Sophia had ever heard it. "Lies that serve not to protect us, but to imprison us in cycles of bitterness and regret. I will not die for your comfort. I will live for my truth, and in doing so, perhaps help you find yours." As the final scene played out, the families, reconciling not over their children's corpses, but through their children's defiant love, Sophia felt Liam's hand move hesitantly to cover hers. Neither looked at the other, their eyes fixed on the stage where their children were rewriting an ending that had eluded them 20 years ago. When the curtain fell, the audience erupted in thunderous applause. Some were openly weeping, others exchanging meaningful glances with companions. But as the cast came out for their bows, a commotion near the Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this heartfelt journey. Stories like Sophia and Liam's remind us that it's never too late for truth, healing, and second chances.